keep going back to this. The sequel is so similar to Gladiator that it actually reminded me of Star Wars The Force Awakens, right? A movie that repeats a lot of the same stuff in Star Wars A New Hope. A New Hope had Luke Skywalker, a kid living on a desert planet, aspiring to leave and be something better. Force Awakens had Rey Palpatine, a kid living on a desert planet, aspiring to leave and be something better. A New Hope had the Death Star. Well, The Force Awakens had a Death Star, except it's bigger. It had Star Killer Base. You know, in Gladiator, here we go. Like in Gladiator had a Roman warrior swearing vengeance against a military and political figure that killed his family. Well, Gladiator 2 had a Roman warrior swearing vengeance against a military and political figure that killed his wife. Gladiator had a crazy emperor. Well, Gladiator 2 has 2 crazy emperors. Like that's what it's doing. Maximus had a mystical, magical black sidekick. Well, Lucius also has a mystical, magical black sidekick. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, just repeating the same exact beats. Paul Mescal's Lucius, he has the same visions. He has the same dreams that Maximus does. Like, I've seen all this before. Oh, okay. All right, here we go. Let's go ahead and move on to my review for Ridley Scott's Gladiator 2, and heavy emphasis on that, Electric Boogaloo. Now, some of you know that I've been rather skeptical about Ridley Scott's Gladiator 2 for quite some time. It's a sequel to a movie that came out nearly 25 years ago, a sequel that they've been trying to make for nearly 25 years. And they came up with some pretty crazy and now infamous ideas for a Gladiator 2 back in the day. One of the most, for those that don't know, one of the most ridiculous being Maximus, Russell Crowe's character from the original film, who died, spoiler, being resurrected by the gods to kill Jesus Christ and his 12 disciples, like a vengeful biblical Terminator.
Hasta la vista, baby Jesus.
He would have killed Jesus and his disciples, and God would have been very mad at him and would have cursed him with immortality, and he would have to fight in all these wars across human history. The American Civil War, World War I, World War II, like all the way up to Vietnam. Just nuts. All right, so they were throwing a lot of things around back in the day. After seeing Gladiator 2, I kind of want to see that movie. It would have been absolutely insane. It would have been the Highlander 2, the quickening of the Gladiator franchise. Just like, we're going to ignore everything that came before. We're going to completely ridiculous over the top. We're going to retcon everything, you know, and at every turn. I think we are owed that movie, chat. We need to see that film. But in any case, I was also very skeptical of this film because Ridley Scott is just not the filmmaker he once was. The quality of his films for the last 2 decades has been mixed, to say the least. You know, for every good movie he makes, which he has, Martian, Last Duel, right? You know, he makes 3 or 4 terrible movies right afterwards. The Counselor, Prometheus, Alien Covenant, and House of Gucci. And lastly, I did not like the trailers or marketing materials for the film at all. The first trailer with the Jay-Z and Kanye West rap music was just such a huge turnoff. And then the second trailer made so much of the film just look like a remake of the original Gladiator, right? Like hitting seemingly a lot of the same beats as the first. And you just had these scenes of some, like these spots of some really bad CGI animals. You know, these weird CGI muty monkeys and a CGI rhino that looked like it waddled out of Black Panther, you know, a Black Panther movie or something. It all just looked wrong to me. Well, I've seen the film, and my skepticism proved true because this entire film is a shallow and hollow imitation of the original Gladiator, right down to its lackluster and contrived story, to its thinly written characters. The film perfectly represents the filmmaker that Ridley Scott is right now, and that's a bad filmmaker. For those that need to know the plot, honestly, don't worry. It's literally the same plot as the original Gladiator. A Roman played by Paul Mescal vows vengeance against a major Roman military and political figure after the death of his wife. He's eventually sold into slavery, bought by a wealthy slave trader and merchant played by Denzel Washington, who he conspires with to gain vengeance, and thus becomes a gladiator and fights in the Colosseum while political and social strife affect Rome. Remember when I said this premise sounds very familiar and how the trailers looked like they were telling the same exact story as the original film? Well, it's because they are telling the same exact story, except it's never once better or as good as the original movie. It is a pale imitation of what came before, except Gladiator 2, which they actually spell with the Roman numeral 2 in the middle, and so it's Glad-2-iator. They did the Fan 4 stick thing. I'm like, why do they keep doing it? Like all these studios, it just makes it so easy to make fun of. I love saying Fan 4 stick. Now I can call this Glad-2-iator. But inevitably, it's just a lot dumber and less interesting than the original Gladiator film. You know, the trailers, the marketing materials, the basic premise also spoils a big plot twist that comes in the back half of the film, which is really, really bizarre. I'm going to touch on that in just a bit. And I just want to touch on the story again, too. However, I do want to focus on some of the characters in the movie because so many of them are underserved by the material that they are given, particularly the film's lead of Paul Mescal, who plays Lucius, who is the little kid in the original Gladiator film, the son of Connie Nielsen's character, who also reprises her role from the first movie. So, you know how, like, the marketing for the movie, like, pretty much said, like, yeah, this is Lucius, and in all the trailers, and saying that, you know, they retconned it where his dad is Maximus. So that's like a big plot twist in the movie. That comes like at the back half of the film, and it's so weird because so much of the movie is like, okay, well, who is this? Because he goes under like a different name, the Lucius character, where he's been exiled to Africa basically by his mother, and he lives out there, and he met a wife, and they're stupping, they're having a great time, but he's made to be like this kind of mysterious figure because he seems to know a lot about the past events of the original movie and things. I'm like, well, yeah, it's obvious because you said that in all the marketing and the press releases and the general description of the movie, except in the film itself, it's supposed to be this mystery. I'm just like, why did you put any of that in the trailers? It's like, it doesn't make any sense. And so you're just kind of sitting. So when it does happen, when it inevitably happens, he's like, but he is actually, Lucius Verus Aurelius. And I'm just like, yeah, we know. What else you got? And his dad is actually Russell Crowe's Maximus Decimus Meridius. And which kind of hurts Maximus's character because, he was like this loving father and husband who like is motivated over the death of his child and wife to do, what he inevitably does in that film. And now they make him like a cheating bastard who cheated on his wife. It's like, and that's the worst thing that you can do in a sequel. One of the worst things you can do in a sequel is you make the original look worse. And I cannot understand why they made that choice to make that retcon and have it be where where Maximus cheated on his wife with Connie Nielsen and they produced this kid. It's utterly bizarre. I don't understand that. But in any case, now Paul Mescal is an actor I'm very unfamiliar with. I guess he's been in a couple movies. He received an Oscar nomination for whatever movie that came out a couple years after something. I never saw it. I don't think I've seen anything with him in it before. If I have, I don't remember. I I think it's with his character, he's just not very good in the movie. Like he's actually quite bad. I think it's due to several factors. One, his entire character goes through the exact same story that Maximus does. He's just repeating the same exact things. And so you're naturally comparing him to Russell Crowe throughout the entire movie. The thing is, like, Russell Crowe's, I mean, that's like one of his seminal performances of his entire career. It's like what won him his best acting Oscar, right? And I don't know why they decide to just have in the sequel a character that is pretty much exactly Maximus, but not give him the same amount of depth or provide him with interesting things to do, because you're just going to constantly invite comparisons. Now, Paul Mescal just doesn't have the charisma of Russell Crowe. Like, he just brought such an intimate, like, brooding to that character, this rage that was always underneath the surface, that passion, and just none of that is on display of Paul Mescal. Now, I don't know too much about him as an actor, obviously, and so I don't want to just say he is a bad actor because I just don't know. I think he's just so underserved by the material, and they just have him do the exact same things that Russell Crowe did, and that in itself just makes it very uninteresting in my opinion. And he's one of the weakest aspects of the movie, and it's made all the more frustrating because we're mostly focusing on him and his story, which just feels incredibly repetitive. And there's a lot of other things I want to bring up with him in just a bit, but we do have other members of the cast in this film. You have Pedro Pascal, who plays this general. I forget his name. I'm going to call him General Pascal. He's the one that Lucius wants vengeance against because, you know, Lucius, oh, it's so funny too, not to go off on a tangent, but to kind of change it up a little bit with Lucius's wife, you know, unlike kind of Maximus' wife, who, you know, wasn't a warrior, they make Lucius' wife a warrior in the film. She's like, yeah, I'm going to defend the city against the Romans. I can't wait. And Pascal's like, I wouldn't want to mess with you. And she immediately dies. Hit with an aerial, and just dies. I'm like, well, that wasn't very interesting at all. So I thought that was very funny. But, you know, obviously Mescal blames Pedro Pascal for doing what he does. And that kind of peters out and really goes nowhere, honestly. Like, eventually, he just doesn't even kind of want revenge against Pedro Pascal, because Pedro Pascal has one. He's a good actor. He's a very good actor. He's in a lot nowadays, but he's a good actor. But here, he has one mode, and that mode is sad. He is just a sad dad throughout this entire film. His whole thing is, I'm tired of conquering. Like, he's good at conquering. He's good at being a soldier and stuff. He goes back to Rome. He talks to the two Looney Tunes who are now emperors of Rome and saying, like, hey, I conquered Northern Africa. Can me and my wife take a vacation? They're like, no, you can't take a vacation. You need to conquer all of Persia. And you need to conquer all of India. And he's like, I don't really want to do that. I'm just sad. Too bad. Or we'll kill you. It's like, no. And that's just his mode throughout the entire movie. He just has the weight of the world on him. And he lets you know that he has the weight of the world on him. Just very uninteresting. And I just brought up the two emperors in this film, played by Joseph Quinn, who people probably best know him for playing Eddie in Stranger Things Season 4. He did an excellent job there. He was also most recently in A Quiet Place Day 1 earlier this summer, which I really enjoyed him there. He did a great job. And you had, I'm not too familiar with this actor, Fred Hetchinger. Apparently, this was supposed to be this character of the other, like, crazy brother emperor was supposed to be played by Barry Keoghan, but he dropped out for whatever reason. They are ridiculous in the movie. They are Looney Tunes characters throughout this entire film. Like, they are basically Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck. They're constantly in 11. I mean, they have no self-control. They're just going, we're crazy, and it's like, all right, like, you can't take them seriously because they just don't feel like real people. They're just there to distract you. You know, they're there to revel in debauchery. They have no depth. And now it makes sense that apparently, because Joseph Quinn and maybe the other actor, they were saying like their inspirations for their characters were Beavis and Butthead. It's like, yeah, they kind of are Beavis, but I looked at them more as Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, just trying to one up each other, you know, with their craziness. But yeah, the Beavis and Butthead comparison is very apt because they kind of have the same amount of development and characterization as those two characters do. Connie Nielsen is on autopilot throughout this entire movie. She's like, I'm here. I'll just point me in the direction, hold up my cue cards, and I'll read my lines. I found her very disappointing in this movie. Also, I don't know if you guys knew this, there's a lot of Botox in Ancient Rome. It's so funny because you have so many actors. You have some people that do return, some of these actors, and not like the big ones. There's a shit ton of flashbacks. There's a shit ton of archive footage that they use, a lot of flashback sequences. But they do bring back some tertiary characters from the original movie, and it's like, okay, they do look older. She just looks swollen and stretched. Like, all over her face. It's like, not a single wrinkle on her. I'm like, wow, that ancient Botox is pretty good. But what they end up doing with her character, I found to be very disappointing. Now, there's one character that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy. And that is Denzel Washington as Denzel Washington. His character has a name. It doesn't matter because Denzel is just playing Denzel. He is playing a New Yorker. He is playing a modern American person living in ancient Rome, okay? And he is playing his character at 11. He is constantly chewing scenery, and it is entertaining. It's also at the same time very distracting because no one else is acting like him throughout the film. When he's on camera, it's the Denzel Washington show, all right? And if you want to see that, then don't worry. The movie has those scenes for you, okay? But if you think that he's going to be actually playing a character, no, he's just himself. It feels like Alonzo survived the events of Training Day, was laying low for 20 or so years and somehow found a time machine and went all the way back to ancient Rome and has just been making his way. It's the exact same character from that movie. And if you're game for that, then you're going to enjoy his performance. I found his performance very silly, but even I have to admit, he is entertaining at times. But the thing is, though, and I keep going back to this, the sequel is so similar to Gladiator that it actually reminded me of Star Wars The Force Awakens, right? A movie that repeats a lot of the same stuff in Star Wars A New Hope. A New Hope had Luke Skywalker, a kid living on a desert planet, aspiring to leave and be something better. Force Awakens had Rey Palpatine, a kid living on a desert planet, aspiring to leave and be something better. A New Hope had the Death Star. Well, The Force Awakens had a Death Star, except it's bigger. It had Starkiller Base. In Gladiator, here we go. Like in Gladiator had a Roman warrior swearing vengeance against a military and political figure that killed his family. Well, Gladiator 2 had a Roman warrior swearing vengeance against a military and political figure that killed his wife. Gladiator had a crazy emperor. Well, Gladiator 2 has 2 crazy emperors. Like that's what it's doing. Maximus had a mystical, magical black sidekick. Well, Lucius also has a mystical, magical black sidekick. I mean, it just goes on and on and on, just repeating the same exact beats. Paul Mescal's Lucius, he has the same visions. He has the same dreams that Maximus does. Like, I've seen all this before. It's also just a very contrived movie, And things just don't come about in a very natural way. Like, they kind of set up Denzel's character of Denzel to be a bit of a schemer. Like, he's a power player. He's like, hey, I've suffered throughout my life, and the thing I want more than anything is to rule Rome. I want power, as he says in the film. And I'm thinking like, oh, cool, he's going to be kind of like the Littlefinger, make a Game of Thrones comparison. He'd be like the Tywin Lannister. He's playing behind the scenes, manipulating all these people, doing his thing. And not really. He doesn't really do that. He just becomes privy to information that is just kind of revealed. Me like, he's not like he doesn't put in the work himself. He just comes to know this and like, all right, I guess I'll just put this into action until, he becomes more and more powerful. Like his rise, that's what I'm saying. His rise to power, his rise to infamy, right? His rise throughout the Roman hierarchy is completely unearned throughout the course of the film because the story just requires him to be in that position because we need to get to the third act. That's why. It's not because it came about in a natural way, not one that's really satisfying or really interesting. It's just like, we need this to happen, so just write in there that he knows this piece of information now and this piece of information now, and he heard this guy say it, off to the side, be like, boom, go, 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 third act. And that's what they do. There's also a magic ring. There is a magic ring introduced in this film. And it's not really magical. It's not like it's the one ring, make you turn invisible, manipulate people. Well, it can manipulate people. Like, there's like these weird MacGuffins they introduce in the film, where at one point, a character gets a magic ring, and they learn that this ring belonged to so-and-so and also belonged to so-and-so because remember this? And this ring is literally a get-out-of-jail-free card. And when anyone sees this ring, they're convinced of like, oh, well, you clearly are this person that you're saying you are. Let's get you on that fucking horse and get you to the third act. That's what we're gonna do. It's just it's so lazy. It's so lazy. And then there's literal plot armor, where someone is wearing a piece of armor that is quite iconic, and for whatever reason, despite other pieces of armor that look just like that piece of armor, people being skewered and shit throughout the entire film like mortal wounds, this armor can't be penetrated at all. Can't be penetrated whatsoever, even though this person has this other person dead to fucking rights, and they should be dying right here. It's ridiculous. And then you have the spectacle. And outside of Denzel Washington, I feel like people will enjoy some aspects of the spectacle. There is some good choreography in this movie, when it's actually much smaller scale, honestly. Like, when it's smaller and it's just man on man, or like, battle between a number of guys and stuff, then it's actually, it works more than it doesn't. But Ridley Scott, he's just wanting to one-up himself. He just wants to create these huge bombastic sequences, and they just look ridiculous. And a lot of these ridiculous sequences have CGI animals, and all the CGI animals look like shit. Like, one of the earliest action scenes, after the initial action scene in the movie, where it's this siege and naval battle attacking this North African fortress. It involves Lucius and a bunch of guys fighting and it's just been seen in the trailers, and they've been talking about it, they've been hyping up these baboons. These CGI baboons. I don't know what they are. They didn't look like baboons to me. They're like they're CGI mutant alien monkeys. Like, they're just not of this world, and they don't look of this world because the CGI looks so terrible. And Ridley Scott has a pretty mixed history using CGI. And I think, and the reason why he says that he uses just so much CGI in this movie, particularly came out when he was making Alien Covenant. He's like, the reason why I don't want to do a practical effects anymore or man in the suit is because it's too difficult, it's too hard, so we just do CGI instead. And I'm like, that's a damn shame, because it looks worse. And it looks really bad here. Like, it immediately takes you out of the movie, like seeing these things that clearly aren't in the scenes with these other actors. It's off. It's one of the worst action sequences this year from a major motion picture. Then you have like this whole scene in which they flood the Coliseum, which was true. They did indeed flood the Coliseum and have mock naval battles. People were like, that's ridiculous. No, they did do that. Now, I don't know about these CGI sharks that they get. I don't know. I'm not sure the Romans were able to capture great white sharks and put them in the Coliseum. I don't think that's true at all, but in Ridley Scott's world, that's what they do. And the CGI in the sharks looks like something from Deep Blue Sea. It looks like an effect that is nearly 30 years old. That's 25 years old. And it's like, why do you even have this? Like, you could have just had the mock battle in the water, and that would have been totally fine. It's like, all right, change it up. This is from history. Cool. But it's the effort to constantly one up himself. Like, I gotta do it bigger. I gotta do it bolder. It's gotta be so grand. It's like, no. It's actually better when it's a little more intimate, where it actually feels like practical things are happening, where real people are seemingly fighting against each other. Not all this CGI. And then to top it all off, you have the CGI rhino in the film waddling out like it's from Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. And it's, first of all, People do not ride rhinos, all right? I'm sure there were attempts to ride rhinos back then, but they figured out painfully that it does not work. And there is no historical evidence of like people riding rhinos in the Coliseum. Rhinos in the Coliseum, sure. Fighting, sure, but not riding. And it's just another CGI battle in which the rhino is promptly defeated by pocket sand. So there is some good spectacle in the battle when it's smaller, when it's more intimate, when it's more like the original Gladiator. And as I just said before, this movie is a pale imitation of the original Gladiator and feels more like the various sword and sandal knockoff movies that Gladiator inspired throughout the 2000s, like Alexander the Great or Troy or something like that. Even though I feel like Troy's better than this movie. It's a movie without a sense of originality. A mediocre sequel that's made all the worse when you compare it to the original film. This is a film that deserves every thumbs down it gets, in my honest opinion. But I was already not expecting a lot from Gladiator 2, but I was just kind of surprised by how poorly made it was and just how incredibly derivative it is as a film. That's just my thoughts on Gladiator 2. What about you guys? What did you think of a Gladiator 2, and heavy emphasis on that, Electra Boogaloo? Did you like it? Were you more mixed on it? Or did you downright hate it? Would you give it the fucking thumbs down? Which they actually changed. Originally, death meant, like thumbs up, and thumb down meant live. But, Ridley Scott, he don't give a shit. He don't care about historical accuracy. What about you guys? What do you think?
5 minutes later.
The Ring of Power. It straight up is the Ring of Power. That ring it's a get out of jail free card. Don't you worry, you'll be good. You'll be aces. All right. Let's see. Your Palmer add +2 constitution. Oh, straight up. They should have had like a dungeon master. Biggie Smith, Seagimmels. That's a good word for it. Seagimmels. I'm going to call it Seagimmels from now on. Seagimmels. Oh, that's a good one. I like that, Biggie Smith. With the budget this movie had, they could have trained. I know. Like, give me some real fucking monkeys. And that's the other thing, too. It's like I just watched Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes during the summer. Right, even the earliest new modern Planet of the Apes films like Rise, like the CGI for Caesar and all those apes looks infinitely better than any of the CGI that they use for these baboons, these alien monkeys that they captured and are using. It's like you have a budget that is estimated between $210 and $300 million. Why could you not do it for this sequence? It's just bizarre. I don't know what studio they went with to do it, but man, some really bad effects. Oh, let's see here. And the same goes for the sharks, and the same goes for the rhino. Okay, maybe I want to respond about Mescal as an actor. I actively encourage you to watch After Sun on Netflix and or All of the Strangers on Hulu. Or if you got the time to roll people, it's a show on Hulu that puts him and Daisy Edgar Jones on the map, and he has a scene that's maybe the most authentic portrayal of someone breaking down during therapy I've seen. Comes on YouTube. You want to watch it. He gives quiet but heart-wrenching performances in all three. I wish any of that was on full display in this movie because again, I've never seen him in anything else. I've never watched any of those other TV shows or movies. This is my first exposure to him, and you know who he honestly reminded me of? His performance reminded me so much of Sam Worthington. Like Sam, funny enough, who was also in a Sword and Sandals kind of fantasy film, the Clash of the Titan remakes. It was like so much of his character just felt like him. Just generic action man. Like he just doesn't. He's either generic action man or he's like bratty man child. Those are his kind of two modes throughout this entire movie. And again, I'm not going to blame him so much for it. Like, he's not Russell Crowe. He's just not. Like, he doesn't have the same charisma as Russell Crowe does. He doesn't bring that same intensity that Russell Crowe, like, it's not on display. Now, I'm not going to go full on 100% blaming him for that. I just feel like the material is not there for him. There is not a single scene that he has in this movie that matches any of the scenes that Russell Crowe had in that first film. And the other thing that works against him is that he is just beat for beat Maximus again. It's like he's literally doing the same exact things that Maximus is doing, put in the same positions that Maximus was put in. And that in itself just makes it uninteresting. It's just like, I've already seen this before. I've seen it better. And so it naturally invites that comparison to Russell Crowe. I wouldn't want to have to compare him to Russell Crowe, but the movie constantly insists that you compare him because of how similar the structure is. And so, possibly he's just woefully miscast. But again, you could have put like so many other actors. Like, you need an actor to come in there and just elevate the material, and that's difficult to do. You can be the most, as I love to say, you could be the most talented actor in the world, but if you're given a shit script and you're given a shit direction, which I'm sure Paul Mescal was absolutely given by Ridley Scott, you're probably going to give a shit performance, or certainly a lackluster one in his case. And so I don't know if you needed someone of Russell Crowe's equivalence to come in there and elevate the material. Maybe they could have. Just Paul Mescal just wasn't that person. But again, I don't full on blame him. A little bit, because I just didn't think he was interesting. I mostly blame the writing. Like, this is a bad script. Infamously, Gladiator, they were shooting that movie without a finished script. Had a very haphazard production. How that movie came to be is like kind of like a miracle in itself. But I don't think this is the original screenwriter for Gladiator. Like, the original screenwriter for Gladiator had 3 people on it. It had David Franzoni, John Logan, and William Nicholson. Okay? In Gladiator 2, according to Wikipedia, because I like to refer to Wikipedia during my reviews, the screenplay is by David Scarpa. Let me actually see what he's done. He did Napoleon. Well, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense now. It's like, there you go. He did Napoleon, All the Money in the World, he did the Day the Earth Stood Still remake, and he did something called The Last Castle. Oh, that movie that you co-wrote. That was way back when with James Gandolfini and Robert Redford. But yeah, this is the guy that wrote Napoleon. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. Because much like Gladiator 2, Napoleon also has a really bad story. Yeah. That definitely affected it. Casey, well, thank you for sharing this review. Chris saved me the trouble of going to see it. No, listen, as I always like to say, like, I may not have liked the movie. I may love something. I may like something. I'm never going to discourage you from going to see it for yourself and come up with your own opinion. You might watch it. You might even love it. You can like it more than I do. You might even hate it as much as I do, or hate it even more. I'm never going to be that kind of critic saying, and this is why you shouldn't see the movie. It's like, no, see it for yourself. I'm just me sharing my opinion. This is my take on the film, what I liked and what I didn't like about it. I'm never going to tell anyone to say not to see it. Deadpool, I just realized that the monkeys remind you of the CGI pygmy mummies. Oh my God, that is what they are. Oh, yes. Oh, I remember these little guys. That's a good scene. I do like that scene, chat. Yeah. There he is. Yep, that's like the CGI baboons from Gladiator 2. Very similar. There are like little, kind of that look. Oh, yeah. Is Gladiator 2 at least better than Red 1? It's like apples and oranges. The thing is about Red 1, we all expected Red 1 to be bad. It's like Red 1 is like, look, this movie looks like a pile of shit, and yes, it indeed was a pile of shit. Like Gladiator 2, as skeptical as I was, like no one was like, so you know what? I think Red 1's gonna be the best movie of the year. I don't think anyone was saying that. But with Gladiator 2, as skeptical as I was, and as I opened my review up saying I was skeptical for these various reasons, I thought, you know what? It could still be great. Ridley Scott could maybe pull this off. Maybe this could be like like the case of like The Martian with him. It could be like The Last Duel, where it's like, you know what, this is pretty good. It's just not. It's just not. Sam Worthington, a.k.a. Default God Soldiers. Oh, my Lord. Oh, Christian, I'll say the clip later. It's really effective when watching the rest of the show, and it shows he's good. Well, I think I don't want to watch it by itself. I want to watch the rest of the show. Last Castle's really good. Ace Rock, Buddy Rock, don't stop juicing me. I'm so fucking juiced right now. I'm really high right now. Oh, my God. F. Good to have you, Ace Rock. Hope you're doing well. Just finished my review for Gladiator 2. Getting some of the chat's thoughts on it right now. See how everyone feels about the movie. Let's see here. Gladiator 2 only looks slightly better. Yeah, slightly better. Slightly better. Yeah. He's even wearing a weird shirt, true. Mummy 2, The Mummy 2 has its moments. And it's just kind of derivative. It's funny enough, it has the same problem that Gladiator 2 does. It's just derivative because it's like, okay, it's the same mummy, it's Imhotep again, It's like, okay. Right. Like, I actually like the idea. Like, the third one is the weakest movie, but the problem with the third one is it's just not well made. But the idea of them dealing with other historical things is interesting. You know, that idea. Malcolm, good to have you here. When I was a kid, I got to go to the red carpet premiere of Mummy 2. My mom knew one of the CGI animators who made those. Wow, look at that. Isn't that fun? That's pretty awesome. That's great. Yeah, those little bastards, they're mean. They're mean. Murdering so many people. Messing up so many people throughout that film. But yeah, Chad, Gladiator 2. I did not care for this movie. I think the thing that really, at the end of the day, that really underserves it and its performers and just everyone involved and just undercuts so much of it is that it's more of a remake than a sequel. Like, I don't know as to why they just decided to give Lucius Maximus's story again. It's the same exact story. Like, the first hour and a half of this movie is just the first Gladiator. Like, I will give him this, the ending is different, but I don't think the ending is very good, like, at all. I thought it was actually handled quite poorly. That's when, like, the writing, like, really, really rears its ugly head and be saying, like, oh, yeah, all this doesn't make any sense. All this feels very contrived. It feels like you're just trying to rush towards the final act of the movie. And it just ends in, oh, God, I kind of want to spoil. I want to spoil one part of the movie. Like, how I don't want to do it though because the movie just came out. People are excited for it. But all I'll say is, like, the final battle in the movie is just ridiculous. It's like, give me a break. And it's just between two guys, but it's who the two people are that makes it so funny. It's like, come on. Give me a break. Do it now. Yeah, I'll wait for next time. I'll do a Gladiator review, like, on Monday, or maybe on the weekend I'll do, like, a brief review of, like, okay, these are the thing. This is, like, everything that was stupid in this movie. So all I'll say is don't go in thinking, like, for the last third, like, the ending, it's like, oh, it's gonna be something special. It's like when well, I don't spoil, like, the original Gladiator, but, like, the ending for Gladiator, how it was like, wow, that felt really impactful and special and sad and, you know, made me tear-eyed and stuff like that. This one does not have that. This one does not have that. It's more of like, why did this guy do that? Why shouldn't he have just done this and that would have solved all his problems? And then why are these two guys, like, fighting? Like, shouldn't this one guy be able to defeat this person because of these obvious things about the other person? Right? That's all I'll say. That's all I'll say. But yeah, chat, Gladiator 2, Electric Boogaloo. Not for me.